My name is Ulrik, and I'm a pricing expert. I'm the CEO and founder of willingness2pay.com. We are a specialist advisory. We have done more than 200 B2B SaaS pricing transformations, and we work globally. My consideration is that pricing is only like very sort of far down the process a number. More than that, it's a structure. So it's a structure that articulates the value that you deliver to whom, and also is a structure that you have to align on in your organization. So we found out that the money is in the structure, and more than trying to align it to the product you have, you actually have to align it to the customers you have. So the catchphrase is, don't price the product, price the customer, and the money is in the structure. And everything else from there goes around figuring out how you as an organization have that conversation, create that design that works well for you, and actually get it executed with your market. Costs. So I think so. If you're outside of software, pricing is still a thing. In software, you could sleep on a little bit for the following reasons. So in any product, you have a value distribution where a lot of customers get a little value out of it, and then you have like a hockey stick where a few customers get a ton of value out of it. And so you can see sort of pricing and packaging as like, where on this sort of power law curve or the hockey stick do you price, right? So you could actually get away with pricing sort of the flat end of your hockey stick, right? So you could say, hey, we're just going to price this whatever, 100, 200, and 500. Then that's going to be it. Ignoring that maybe a few customers would get 1 million of value out of your product. And you could ignore that because every customer costs you the same to deliver to, right? So you could just say, hey, every customer is like $1 to deliver. So, we're going to get 99 out of this and 190 out of the other and 490 out, whatever the examples were, right? And then that meant that from a business perspective, all you had to do was just grow revenue. If you grow revenue, your margins will follow and you will have a valuable business. Now AI comes in, compute costs come in, and suddenly you have a cost of goods sold. And suddenly that customer that got 1 million of value, they also generate 1 million of cost. So if you still have a flat pricing model, like pretending you have a flat-ish hockey stick and you're actually not also pricing the tip of the hockey stick, suddenly you have to live with the bottom end. I call this the double hockey stick problem, where you have the cost hockey stick, and that's real, and it's actually like pulling money out of your P&L. And that means that people are now scrambling to, well, can we avoid the cost? Maybe not. Okay, can we with pricing actually make sure that they pay for value? And I think that's why pricing is relevant more than ever today. The thing is that all of the pricing models are right for someone, right? So it's one of these like, which spice is the best? Well, is it curry or is it Thai basil or what? Like, depends on what dish you're making, right? So usage-based like had a big surge a few years ago, partly because suddenly the data sources and like the technology was ready for it, but also because then the technology was ready for it, and a lot of companies were like really well priced with usage. And then everybody, like, so if you have a product and it isn't going really well, and then you discover usage-based pricing, and suddenly like your growth explodes, you're going to become an evangelist and say, hey, like it's usage-based pricing, folks, like that's where the money is. And then the next guy tries it, but for him, that's not the right model. That product, that customer category, like that risk profile for the customers, they don't want usage-based, they want something else, right? And so for that product, that founder, it's not going to work. And I think so you have these sort of hype cycles where new pricing concepts become popular or in vogue because they always work for someone, right? So right now we have credit systems, for example, which have like really good balance of, let's say, prepaid, like cash up front, but still price based on how much you use. And you can have really complex product structures in them, which is good for a lot of AI products that haven't sort of figured out exactly what kind of value they're going to deliver, and they could do a lot of things. So I think it's one of these where people need a good framework to consider what their product does, how their customers want to buy it, how they want to sell it, how they can consider the trade-offs, and then pick a model that works really well for them. And that's the hard part. And the thing is that even if you're a seasoned business owner, you're on your third business, you've only done it 3 times, right? So nobody outside of sort of consulting have a lot of reps in it, right? So it's just one of these things where most people are figuring out based on a very low experience pool, right? So that's what it is. So I think there are different flavors of it depending on what kind of company you are. So for sure, if you are an early stage startup, like that's your job. Like you're trying to find the pricing model that works for you. So between 0 and sort of 3 to 5 million ARR, you're in what I would call a hustle phase. So you basically like sell anything in any way that they want to buy, and just like, and then you can sort of figure out what works and like create a more like stable model after that. And then on the other end, you have companies like Salesforce, OpenAI that have like done, let's say, 10 plus major pricing changes in the last 12 months. And they're essentially doing it like they're in the hustle phase. Like they are saying, okay, we have a new technology, we have a new product category, and we need to sort of figure out what the right model is. So I think this is a realization from some players that it is, the product is only half of the value equation. The other half is the right commercial model around it. So they are just testing out different models, and then having the, let's say, courage to just roll it back if they don't think that it works. So I think that's actually how it should be in a sense. And I think the winner is going to be the one that finds the right model, and the best way to find the right model is to think deeply about it and then like test if it works, and if not, then try again until you succeed, right? And then like if you're already like OpenAI running a like $1 billion loss per month, it isn't, you don't have as much to lose, right? So I think it's also one of the things where if you're in a position where it has to work, and then it's just burn the boats and just get after it and find the right pricing model, right? And I think because a lot of the pricing models that are being tested out now are unfamiliar to the market, it can be really hard to know before the fact if it's going to work. So the only way to do it is to actually try and sell it. If it works, keep it. If not, scrap it. I think you have that pressure. I think it's I think you fundamentally in AI right now have to deal with change. And I think that more than anything, the pressure comes from change, in that whatever we do, it will change. So you have 2 fundamental things that will change with AI. One is the cost. So whatever you can do today, you can do cheaper tomorrow, also from an LLM model. And the other is capabilities. So it will be able to do things tomorrow that it can't do today. So any kind of like, let's say, balancing that you have between, okay, so we will do this and it costs us this much and it's stable, it works, is going to break down, right? So because 6 months from now, costs will have changed, capabilities will have changed, and then you're sort of in new territory all the time. So that means that a lot of the pressure comes from like trying to sort of accept that that's the reality that you're living in and just ride the wave of that. The good thing about that pressure is that 90% of it is in your own head. We do a lot of also early stage AI startups, and a lot of them focus on, well, this LLM costs us whatever, 7,000 a month, and this, whatever it is, and just like ignore all that. Like, so you are fundamentally chasing value in the market. Like you're trying to figure out where there is an opportunity that a segment of people in the universe are willing to pay a lot of money for. And then you articulating that, even in an unprofitable way, is step 1, because you can always make it profitable later. The hard part is figuring out where the money is. And then costs can be solved sort of subsequently. So just price the customer instead of trying to do sort of a cost plus or being profitable on every sort of part of the LLM and so forth. Just ignore that for now if you can, if you have the funding for it, and just figure out where the revenue is. and what customers really truly value, and then you work back from there. I think what you have to do is you have to figure out how it is valuable in your customer portfolio, in your space. So one thing, of course, is to invest heavily in it, to make sure that you give the product team doing this sort of the autonomy to actually sort of rethink from the ground up, like from a product perspective, some of the things. So there can be nothing is holy. Like you have to sort of upend your own business. But you still have quarterly goals, you have a revenue base, you need to do all these things. So from introducing, one way we have done it is, what I've said is, like, if you have 100 customers and they represent, like, let's say 100 million of revenue or something like that, take a small subset of them, take maybe 5 customers or so, and give them a very beneficial pricing model. Let's say you give them an all-you-can-eat model, like just use everything you can. Pricing is not an obstacle. It doesn't need to be free, but it could just be like a flat license. Hey, you're going to pay like $500,000 a year, and then you just like, but then all of your 5,000 employees get like free access. You can put a fair usage policy in if you want to like cap the extreme downside, but essentially you want to experience what customers do and what adoption is if pricing isn't a paywall, right? Because if you constantly are afraid that you're going to lose money and you put in paywalls everywhere, you never know if it's the paywall or if it's the product that's stopping the adoption. So you want to have this sort of little petri dish or experimental customer base where you actually get to run experiments. And then you can take those specific customers, say, okay, so what worked there? How did the data sort of run? Like what stacked? And then you can use that to design better models for the rest of them, right? I've just done that with a customer that did 100 million plus ARR a decade into it. They ran a little petri dish, and they're now using that very specific learning they have there to sign their first 8-figure contract elsewhere. Yeah, so the presentation I just gave is called How to F Up Your Pricing. And the subtitle is actually No Teamwork Needed. So the fundamental premise is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And in a way, the way I sort of choose to talk about it is that it functions as a value stream, which means that there is an upstream and a downstream. Something happens, then something else happens, and then so there's a sequence of events inside the organization. So look at it this way. The CPO, the product office, is like the value architecting function. So those are the ones that figure out, okay, so what value are we going to deliver to the market in terms of product? How should we represent that with the packaging? What's the pricing model like, and all that? Then that blueprint, let's say, essentially gets handed off to sales. And if we stay in the architecture metaphor, they're the builder. They're the ones who actually have to like lay the bricks and like figure out to actually sort of make it real, right? They have to sell the contracts, they have to do all these things. And then at the end, you have the CFO office who, let's say in this analogy, becomes the engineer. They're the one who have to ensure that there's structural integrity, like make sure that we don't lose money, that like all the spreadsheet map up. They also have to do the billing systems and all that, right? And then you have the CEO that sort of oversees that everybody sort of plays well together, right? So the idea is that if you have a really poor value architecture, like you just have lousy packaging and pricing, it's really, really difficult to then like fix that in the sales process, right? So conversely, if you have really good pricing and packaging, you can mess it up in the sales process, right? You can say, for example, we're just going to create a lot of bespoke deals. Like we're discounting everywhere. We're going to like do a lot of feature toggling we're just going to break the pricing and packaging. We have good pricing and packaging. We're just going to make so many exceptions in the actual sales process that what gets executed isn't that, it's something else, right? And then in the CFO office, even if you have really good pricing and you have like really good execution of it, you can still mess things up with extremely poor data, with not having a billing system that actually supports what is like the best pricing and packaging. And you can also start to create different constraints of the system, such as, we want every feature, every customer, every tiny aspect of the process to be individually profitable, right? So if you do that, you create a lot of weird incentives in the rest of the organization, such as, okay, so we can't really give things away. Every new feature needs to be spun out as an add-on, otherwise we can't make money. So you start to make complexity where it shouldn't exist, right? So that means that every part of the organization in their specific way can mess up pricing. And of course, the idea is that it's a coordination problem. Like all of them, to create good pricing, have to coordinate their efforts and make like healthy trade-offs. So like, okay, so if we do that, can you do the revenue recognition on the back end of it? And yes, I can, and so on. And that really sort of requires that executive function, the CEO function on the side, to say, I hear all of you, you're making really good arguments, we're going to do it this way. And it's not perfect, but collectively it's sort of the best outcome that we can create as an organization. So there is no perfect model, but there are models that functionally work better than others, and that really requires coordination across that value stream in the organization. The first step is actually to realize that having a really good pricing and packaging is worthless if it doesn't get implemented. And it sounds boring almost as a point, but if you take that seriously, then you also realize that no model is going to work unless you actually have alignment in the organization around it. So step one is actually to get the CPO and the CRO and the CFO, or senior product, senior sales, senior finance, in a room and discuss, what are we delivering to the market? What are the outcomes of the jobs to be done that we solve for, in what way, and how should we articulate that in pricing and packaging, and actually get buy-in to the model sort of upstream. Because if you get the whole sort of participation from upstream, downstream, from product, from sales, from CFO office, it's like, okay, this is how we see the world, this is how we create value. Then you can lock in the architecture, and then you have that understanding when you then go and execute it in sales, and when you then go and execute it in your revenue recognition or your finance and so forth. And that is what gives you the best chance of actually executing something that conceptually is sound and matches the value that you see in the market. I don't know. So I like numbers. So I studied model theory. And model theory really is the study of the connection between theory and praxis. So one of the things you study in model theory is, well, what is a model? A model essentially is a map of reality. It's sort of, okay, so we have a model and it represents reality in certain ways, where the model allows you to understand or run experiments that then corresponds in a certain way to how reality works, right? And then there is a big part of philosophy that studies how scientific communities, they converge around models, and they also converge around interpreting data into certain sort of conceptual constructs. And sometimes they're wrong. Like most of the Middle Ages is like a study of history of people interpreting data wrong, right? And then so was like the 19th century, and probably like a lot of the things that we believe today are also wrong, and we'll learn them shortly, right? And so just knowing this, having looked at sort of the history of scientific discovery, the interplay between experimentation, belief, concepts, like the idea of science and what it means when something works or doesn't, or is right or is wrong or true or false, gives you this sort of space within which to sort of navigate a lot of these discussions when people say, hey, we want something to be data-driven, or that can't work, or this is false, or we need to make principled decisions and so forth. And suddenly you sort of understand something else around all those discussions, which is really valuable when you want to run something like that. It's not so much that people are missing it, in that it is just hard to really believe until you've seen it happening. So I think what most people are missing is just the idea, like, you don't know what product market fit on until you've experienced it, right? So a lot of people actually think they have good pricing because they've never experienced what good pricing feels like, right? So a lot of people are under monetizing, thinking that they're doing fine, right? And I think a lot of people just settle for something that works way less than it could. And that's bad, but maybe not the end of the world. But I think one of the things that you should realize is that pricing becomes a virtuous cycle. So the pricing you have is also the budget you have for everything else. So if you price 100, then you have 100 to pay for the sales and pay for the product development and pay for other overhead and then profits, right? So if you then price 200, then you have double the budget. you can literally double your CAC, spend twice as much on product, onboard for twice as much, and have twice as nice an office and have twice the profits, right? So what we actually see is that a lot of companies that manage to sort of lean into this and say, okay, so we want to get as close to that as we can, are also the ones that manage to sort of get, let's say, the funding from the market to then invest in the process to deliver the value. So it's one of these things where pricing becomes a perpetual game where it's replayed and replayed and replayed with your customer, as opposed to just being a transaction that's then done, right? So the idea is that if you manage to charge a lot of money, that actually is what enables you to give a lot of value back, right? So it's a little bit like the oxygen mask principle of pricing, is that you need to put it on yourself first so that you can breathe and you can help someone else. And that someone else is your customer, right? So actually figure out how to charge so that you have the resources to deliver the value. And I think that fundamentally is like a belief that a lot of people don't even know they have.